when you're looking at child sexual abuse in particular, and that's, I guess, where I've had some involvement and expertise, one of the most insightful analyses of the problem, it comes from a man called David Finkelhauer. He is one of the great experts in the United States on this area, a real pioneer in the field. David said that for sexual abuse to occur, there are 4 preconditions which must be satisfied. The first one is that the person must be motivated to sexually abuse a child. Not all of us are, I'm glad to say, but some people are, and some men in particular. I sent to David some background notes, which I hope will end up in your package somewhere, about this issue. People are motivated to sexually abuse children for a variety of reasons. They're not always pedophiles. We get confused about that. They can be very antisocial personalities. The literature on this area has moved an enormous amount in the past few years. We used to talk about incest offenders and those who offend outside the family. We'd all talk about people who offend against children, those who offend against adults. But what the research has been showing in the last few years is that men who abuse can abuse across a great range. They can be rapists as well as child sex offenders. They can be child sex offenders as well as rapists. They can be exhibitionists. And astonishingly, the research has shown, including some research I've been involved with, that they very often commit other crimes as well, property crimes, drug dealing, those sorts of things. A lot of child sexual abuse is by antisocial personalities who commit a range of crimes, who see women as objects, see children as objects, and engage in abusive behaviour. It's not always just pedophiles, but they are an important part of it. The person must be motivated to sexually abuse a child. The person must overcome their internal inhibitions to this behaviour. And here, it's striking, disturbing, isn't it, that people who claim allegiance to Christ could abuse a child, because what they're doing is they're overcoming what ought to be quite a strong pressure of conscience in their hearts about doing that. But they do. And pedophilia in particular can be a very a very insistent urge that men have to have sexual relations with children. Very difficult for those men to control. They involve recurrent fantasies, recurrent urges, and people can claim allegiance to Christ and yet not have that part of their lives under control. The whole issue of Christian sexuality is a big thing. Lots of men don't have their sexual lives under control. Right? And if you think about child sexual abuse as being part of that spectrum of men who don't have their sexual lives under control, then you begin to see how Christians might abuse children, just as Christians have affairs, just as Christians engage in premarital sex, just as Christians use pornography. It's just part of a disturbing spectrum of Christians not having their sexuality under the lordship of Christ. And for those who have attractions towards children, that means that they overcome the internal inhibitions to abusing kids. The third and the fourth preconditions are really important, I think, for understanding child protection in churches, because the third precondition is that the offender must overcome external barriers to access to the child. Now, in the creche, even if they were motivated to abuse the baby, which would be extremely rare in the literature that I have seen, but even if they were, there's 2 or 3 young mums around and all that sort of thing. So too with our younger kids' programs. But in the youth group, there's just much more opportunity for men in particular, and most of this is men, to be alone with older kids. It becomes more natural to invite a kid out to go on a bike ride, and outside of the actual youth meeting or youth program, but it becomes the basis on which one-to-one friendships can be formed, and it can become something that parents are more willing to let occur. As kids get older, they become more independent. They also become more sexually aware. And a lot of child sexual abuse is consensual. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying consent's valid, I'm not saying consent is somehow an excuse. Of course it's not. What I mean by that is it's not forced. And why not? Because men engage with children's, young people's emerging sexuality. Can I tell you a story of the first time one of my students told me about sexual abuse? It was early 1990s. I was wet behind the ears and a young lecturer and so on. But I was involved in child protection, and one of my students came to see me, very, very bright girl, done incredibly well in the HSC. That's why she was at the University of Sydney studying law. And she said, I was sexually abused as a teenager. And she said, I'm concerned now because my younger sister is the age I was when that abuse occurred. And she told me with great honesty and great openness about how it had occurred. She was 13 to 14 years old when it first started. It was a maths teacher in her school, deputy principal of the school in fact, and he would have one-on-one sessions with her in the library to give her extra tuition in maths. How kind of him. It was a private school, and he showed this girl special attention. Now Ken, do you mind if I do this? What he says, this. You're at the computer, Ken? And he puts his hand on the girl's shoulder. She's at the computer. He's behind her, and he simply puts his hand on her shoulder. Not too intimidating, I hope. The next week, they were sitting face to face, opposite each other, and he leant over and he just touched her knee. And she said it was exciting. It was exciting. If she had flinched when he put her hand on her shoulder, I suspect he would have backed off. But he first puts his hand on her shoulder, and she doesn't flinch, she welcomes it. And then the next week he puts his hand on her knee, which is a bit more intrusive, a bit more invasive, but not really. Right? It's not sexual abuse, but she didn't flinch, she didn't withdraw. No, she welcomed it. And she was a girl from a broken home, her parents had divorced, she was very needy, she was in need of love, and here was a married man in his 30s showing her attention. She was thrilled. She was thrilled. And for many years, she talked about this as her first affair, as her first sexual relationship. She didn't see it as abuse, because she was in this privileged position that this married man with 3 kids was interested in her, not her wife, not his wife. That gave her real status. I guess it picks up some of the themes from earlier about Hegel. Do you see that he groomed her? That's the word we use. He drew her in to the sexual relationship. And with boys in particular, that can be a reason why they don't tell you for 20 years, 30 years after the events, because they feel in some way complicit in what happened. The offender is very clever. The offender knows how to push the right buttons. And for young people, it can be exploitation of their emerging sexual awareness. And even with younger children, there can be incredibly guilty feelings. At one level, it felt awful. At another level, it felt good. Even younger children can respond physiologically to sexual stimulation. So there's a terrible confusion in their minds about this is good and this is bad at the same time. And what that does to you is renders you silent.